So we're recording now. Okay. So hi, True School community out there. I'm talking to the True School. I'm Lindsay Peterson, and I work with the True School, and I am here in this Zoom room with Rose Sackey-Milligan. And Rose is a well-loved and well-respected trainer with the True School, among many other things that Rose does. So given that most of our classes for this spring semester have been canceled, we just wanted to connect with some of our trainers and talk with them about social justice movements and what coronavirus is revealing, and how they are relating to the landscape of the virus and justice. So Rose is our first trainer for this conversation.
Oh.
So Rose, thank you for being the guinea pig for our
my pleasure.
So Rose, your classes and my sense of your work more broadly is that it orients around this thread between contemplative practice and contemplative practices and the engagement and enactment of social justice, like that thread.
Right.
And I'm just curious, is the pandemic highlighting or refining this interplay between contemplative practice and social justice for you? Or you can go a different way.
For speaking individually.
Yeah.
And personally, I do not think that I could make my way through this time without a contemplative, a reflective tool, because the enormity of what we're facing, the implication for the future of what we're facing is so enormous that I don't know if you don't have a way of sitting with all of the questions and the challenges that we're facing. How does one manage to survive? Because I could imagine that many people are, and I've observed it myself, your mind just spins out of proportion, and we've seen how it's led to panic and hoarding and fear and uncertainty, and of course that's understandable.
Yeah.
But I believe that for myself, having some grounding in a practice that helps me helps me understand, not understand, but face and accept this moment, comes from a practice that that helps one get beyond the mind, and the psychological mind and all that it can produce, that's scary and horrifying and anxious and panic and fear, and to live in that place because your mind is so focused on those kinds of thoughts is for crazy making. So no, really, I mean, if you spend all your time in a state of panic and fear and worry and uncertainty, and because there's all of your illusions are shattered completely and you're groundless, then what do you have to hold on to? And so if you don't have a sense of grounding, then
Yeah.
of course you would be filled with fear and
Yeah.
horror and
Yeah.
worry. And understandably so. Understandably so.
Right. It's not
So
judgment.
for
It's
me at this time, no, it is not a judgment,
yeah.
but an observation.
Yeah.
And not to say in my own self, I noticed. I
Mm-hmm.
noticed when there were moments of panic and fear and worry. Of course, I felt them, I saw them.
Yeah.
But I think the practice, having a practice that doesn't allow you to stay in that place, but to just really see and notice that that's what's happening, and to not get consumed and overwhelmed by it. I
Right.
think that's where the miracle is, to maneuvering through these times.
Yeah. And it's like you need to have that experience, like a visceral experience of
Right,
another way of moving through the world than a
right,
fear-based one in order
right,
to be not I mean at least to be yourself present in the world, and
yes,
then beyond that to be participant with movements for justice in the world.
right,
You need that
right,
grounding in some other possible way.
exactly. And so the implications for social justice work
Yeah.
requires that perhaps more and more of a movement deeply, deeply consider the value of a contemplative life.
Mm,
Because as this time has shown,
mm,
visible experience that the movement for change cannot, I don't think, cannot really survive going forward. The tools that it used in the past, people coming together, organizing, I think we have to find a different way. So one has to, I think, this moment allows for much more creativity, for, you know, for deeper insights on how to move social justice work forward in this in these deeply uncertain times.
yeah.
And so I think it calls upon more activists, more organized, more movement people to really consider in a deeper and profound way
Yeah.
how one stays grounded in a time that requires different tools and different ways of moving the work forward, because
Mm.
it's almost as if um, we we've had this rapid transformation, this rapid movement,
Right.
and it requires, I believe, different ways of thinking, different ways of intuiting how to move
Mm-hmm.
in times when things are much more uncertain. It requires a leadership with uh, with strong, grounded roots. It requires much more elevated and a much more elevated state of, consciousness
Mm.
to address issues that are, um, I think, much more clearer now than
Yeah.
before.
Right.
Very, very clear what we've done and what
Yeah.
we're up against. And so I think that requires a leadership
Mm.
that is much more conscious, and functioning from a much more elevated
Mm.
space, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm observing that the simultaneity of elevated and grounded.
Yes, yeah.
Just
And I think the two go together. The 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 higher the elevated state, you know, I think the deeper the grounding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the how one of the ways I interpret what you do in the classes that you offer through the True School
Mm-hmm.
most frequently
Yeah.
are that you, through this coming together as community, right? You help people to experience contemplative practice as a community practice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, I mean, I think a lot of times I hear like contemplative practice and it's very individual oriented, very like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we do have to like carry the practices ourselves on our own,
Right.
but certainly I think your like the invocations and the way you do the readings provide a space of like that community and contemplative together.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like a question would just be for those who maybe didn't have contemplative practice
Right.
before now,
Right.
you know, who especially maybe, I mean, I know a lot of activists are like hyper dependent on community for
Right.
identity and
Right.
for meaning. So I guess I just like community contemplation, how to gather practices now, or how to start one, or how to, yeah, in this time where we're alone. Do you have
Yeah.
any?
Are you asking for an individual practice or for a communal practice?
Well,
Either one or
I mean, ideally, it's like what is an individual practice that's connected to a communal uh,
yeah.
identity and understanding. That
Well, I don't think that there's one.
yeah,
There's varied practices. There's some practices for, as you know, for individual, and there's some practices that are intended to um, to build a collective.
yeah,
And so the practice that I use is one that uh, helps helps individuals connect at it's experiential, so it's much more a sort of a sensing and a feeling
mm-hmm,
and a slowing down and a building. You know, it's really hard to describe. It's
yeah,
a building of a sort of a collective sensing, a collective heart, because um, the readings the readings are potent. They're potent readings that stimulate your mind and also break your heart.
yeah,
And so to have these two things happening simultaneously with everyone in the room
mm,
creates a sort of a energetic synergy that
mm,
helps people feel a connection to each other.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and the words that I'm using don't fully describe you. One has to really
mm,
feel it. So it's a feeling when you hear James Baldwin's
yeah,
words or some of his phrases.
yeah,
You hear it in your head, but you also feel it in your heart.
yeah,
And so if everyone in the room has had a chance to be in a quiet, silent space and to really hear the same words and to simultaneously feel it in your heart, everyone is feeling the same thing. So it's
mm-hmm,
hard not to. So that is the thing, that you're gripped by the words, you're gripped by your individual feelings, and you're gripped by what it means
mm,
out in the world, these terms, you know, these phrases or the situation out in the world. And so that's how you build community, and people are feeling the same and they're feeling that connection. And so oftentimes what happens is people are moved to action. I don't know how serious they are. I don't, you know, life takes over. I don't know if they follow through on the things that they say, but there is this impulse, this collective impulse to act in the
yeah,
moment, at least.
yeah,
If you're moved, your heart is broken, it's
yeah,
broken open.
yeah,
And so you want to do something. You want to, you know, take an action
yeah,
to rectify whatever the situation is. Yeah. So yes, communal practice is valuable if you're organizing,
Yeah.
in your community, with people who don't know each other. It's an important tool.
Yeah.
And it's not very threatening. It's not threatening at all. It just requires a reading that is going to provoke, that's going to be moving, that's going to be stimulating, that's going to touch you on the issue of race or whatever it is, because you need to be touched. You need to move from your head to the heart. That's what happens. So the reading provides that, the door into the broken heart, which you need.
It seems like now that's also part of it, that back to the beginning when you were talking about the spinning mind and the
Right.
being in the fear.
Right.
There's a way in which that is like an avoidance of letting your heart break a little bit.
Right.
And
Right.
so right now, even though we're in our little bubbles, like there is a challenge that we could take on to sort of be heartbroken in a way, but to do that tenderly. I mean, to like do that with contemplative practice and grounding.
Right.
Um,
And that tool is useful. And I would also say, in the same breath, that sometimes we need, we need to be hit on the head. We need to be clobbered. Because I don't think that we're motivated. Human beings are not motivated to do certain things unless they are pushed hard out of their comfort zones. And so while practice is great to stay centered and focused, the interpretation of what's happening in the moment suggests to me that a brilliant one, actually, a brilliant push is what we're experiencing right at this moment. And yes, we are being held. Your practice holds you, but the interpretation of what is happening is also important. And I think practice helps you with an interpretation that is expansive, that is not limited to all this little virus. And I have to protect my family, and that's part of it, but that is not the entire picture of what we're facing. And so I found that the practice has really helped me to understand, for example, that what we're experiencing is part of a massive list of warnings that we have been getting for the past 400 years around the environment, capitalism, the impact of our behavior in the world, the way that we've been pressing the earth. I mean, it's so clear to me and so I can rest in that elevated analysis, because I know it's just not about this little virus. There's something cosmic that's being offered to us as a warning, because it could be much worse than what we're experiencing. So I'm only pointing out to you that it's so important to have a way into an analysis that's not limited to just sort of individual concerns and what do we do to protect our family. I'm not saying that those are not important,
Yeah.
but I think that the transformation that is required, that is needed, we're being forced into it, kicking and screaming, because we have not done the things that we could have done differently, that may not have brought us to this space. And the universe said, okay, you can't do it on your own, I will help you.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple,
Yeah.
but clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then if that is a perspective that, you know, that jives with movement building, then what do you do with that?
Yeah.
You know, how do you approach the work in the world?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of possible responses to that. That's a big question. And
Yeah.
one thought that I had is, I mean, there have been so many voices and communities delivering these warnings to us for decades. And, you know, I think especially of the indigenous communities and indigenous leaders whose voices have been immensely generously trying to lead us to pay attention and live differently. You know, so one possible response to that big question is, as movements, to be aware of who we're paying attention to, you know, who has that wisdom, and has had it already.
And you know, then you ask yourself, you know, well, who or what group of people can lead this planet to this different space? I don't think it's it doesn't, you know, is it the government? You know, so it helps to ask the questions that will get you to solutions. And I think we're seeing, I mean, you know, the development of co-ops and people organizing around building community, sustainable foods. And I mean, some of that is already happening. But I think the massive work is going to come from people on the ground, from individuals, ordinary, average people who, you know, who can do this.
Awesome. A brilliant push. I like that.
Absolutely. Brilliant. It's brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, anything else you want to offer up to the people, the fan base out there, the True School community?
You know, I know this is a difficult time for all of us, right? I mean, I want to just to walk out of my house, you know, I want to do the things I would love to, that I love doing, you know. As you know, this trip I was planning.
Yeah.
It's like, and so, you know, there's that part of me like, oh, you know, disappointment, and I notice it. But there's another part of me that is so relaxed, in the sense that this is part of our human evolution. We're undergoing this long extended process of this human evolution and of our consciousness, of way of being, right? This is what it is. And so I'm delighted with it. You know, everything is okay. Everything is really okay. It is inconvenient in certain ways. I mean, I wish things were different. But I don't know that it could be any other way for what needs to happen. You know, to create this evolved human
Mm.
being, this evolved humanity that we say we want, right? Isn't this what social justice work is about? And so this is it. It's happening. The lots and lots of people. I don't know if the 7.5 billion people will change. I don't think that we could undergo this situation and not be changed by it. And there's a Yoruba proverb that says, the person that leaves home in the morning is not the person that comes home in the afternoon. So I cannot believe that all of us won't be transformed, even in some tiny way, by this experience that this entire planet Earth is experiencing. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Everybody, how is that possible?
But it is planetary too.
It is planetary. It's a planetary process of evolution, and so that's what excites me. And so it's okay. It's really okay. Yeah. So those are my last words.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rose, for chatting with us. I'm gonna